Good afternoon, 7/20/2022. That is the date. Approaching August, people. Let's have a discussion. I'll wait for a few people to come on board, and then we'll talk business. New topic. Donald Wells Jr., the son of Don Wells, as Summer Wells still remains missing. Summer Wells still remains missing. No stone left unturned. We're going to analyze and dissect Don Wells' son, because we've heard things about Don Wells' son. Stuff that Don, his father, has put out there. Stuff that the media put out there. But I'm digging in a little bit more. And I've uncovered some very disturbing stuff about Don Wells' son, Donald Wesley Wells Jr. Very disturbing stuff. So we'll wait for a few to come on, and then we will go. I got court documents. I got receipts. I like using that word, by the way. I got the receipts. Always providing receipts. And always fact check. Fact check. But Don Wells, his son, has a disturbing past. Very disturbing past. And we're going to discuss. We'll start out first. Hi, good afternoon. How are you? Busy day. Busy day. We're going to start out first. I'm going to play a recording, right? I'm going to play a recording of Don Wells a couple days after Summer Wells went missing. In a few days. I believe it's like 3 or 4 days after Summer Wells was reported missing. Probably around the, I think, 18th of June, 19th of June. Summer Wells went missing. For anyone that doesn't really know the cases, just jumping on, Summer Wells was reported missing on June 15th, 2021. A few days later, Don Wells started speaking to the media, and he gave a couple interviews with local media. And I've been reviewing those tapes to definitely see how his timeline and storyline progressively changed over time as other bigger media outlets began to speak to him. Don Wells also going on YouTube, sharing, his chain of events. So I always go back to the original interviews that Don Wells gave before, he jumped onto YouTube and created a storyline. But he talked about his son. He talked about his son, Donald Wesley Jr. And a reporter, was asking him. So I'm going to play this recording, and then I'm going to share with you why Don Wells lied. Don Wells is a liar. It seems like a lot of things that he says to the media is not the truth. And this is another example. I'm showing you another example. So spin this around. Here it is. Right here. We're gonna play this recording. I added a little thumbnail to it. We are going to play this recording starting now.
Here's another sticky one. Situation with your oldest son. In his previous criminal history, and his conviction as a sexual offender against children. That's a pretty big red flag, and I asked you about that last time we spoke.
Yeah. Well, let me elaborate if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, if here in Tennessee, say for instance, your boy or one of your kids, is 17, and the one he's with, say he's 18 and she's 17 or something like that. Okay, in other states, especially like Utah, you're probably not going to even ever get out of prison. But here in Tennessee, they look at there's got to be so many years difference between them. Okay, but in Arkansas, where he was arrested, they don't care about that. But here in Tennessee, he would have never went to jail, and he would have got to raise his boy, and everything probably would have been fine. But in Arkansas, total different story. I mean, there's got to be a certain amount of years between them. And there was only 18 months, maybe a year, I don't know, between them.
Oh, was that a situation like she was like 16 or 17 and he was
yeah, like 18 or 19, and she was, it was only like 18 months difference.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That
they had a baby.
Look a lot worse then.
Yes, it does, and it's wrong. It is wrong. There's a lot of, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, see, then
I'll even have him call you if you want me to, and he could probably explain it better to you.
Well,
he's a good kid.
When we spoke the first time, you said that you talked.
Yeah.
You said that you talked to him and that he was in Utah when this all happened.
No, they was in Arkansas.
Oh, he was in Arkansas when this all happened.
Yes, sir, and he done time in Arkansas State Prison.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, when Summer went. When Summer went.
Oh yeah. He's in Utah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think the police have already alluded to this, but there's no connection between him and what happened to Summer.
No way he would ever think of something like this. I mean, when I first told him, he bawled like a little baby. My sisters all cried, and there's so many good Christian folks around here. I didn't even realize till this happened how many good people there are around here. But,
all right. So what's your take on that? Don Wells seems like he has also a pattern of downplaying things. And he also, if you notice in a lot of his interviews, he always throws in the religious card. When people, ask him these questions, he starts saying, oh, we're surrounded by Christians and we're family people and we don't hang around with bad people. We try to hang around with church-going people. He likes to throw that out a lot. But he said in this interview about his son, oh, it's no big deal. It's one of those situations where, he was 18 and she was only 18 months, maybe a year younger, in the state of Tennessee, that's not even considered a crime, so he's downplaying it. However, I got the court documents of that case. That specific case, and I'm also going to reveal lots of other court documents about his son in Arkansas. But that's not, Don Wells lied. He lied. And here is the court document right here. And I'm going to read it to you guys. This is the case. Out of Washington County, Arkansas. I'm going to read it. Donald Wesley Wells, born in 1986, in the Circuit Court of Washington County, State of Arkansas, count 1, sexual indecency with a child, felony. But it talks about a little bit about this child, and I'm going to share. Count 1, being 18 years old of age or older, he solicited another person who was less than 15 years old to engage in sexual intercourse, deviate sexual activity, or sexual conduct. Defendant, being 18 years old, did solicit a 14-year-old female, KV, to have sexual intercourse with him. 14 people, she was 14. She wasn't the 1 year, it's an 18 and 17, like Don Wells says, he was 18 and she was only, 18 months, kind of different, that's not a crime. What? The dude tried to solicit sex with a 14-year-old. Yes, it is disgusting, but the truth has to come out. Oh, it's not a crime. He said it wouldn't even be a crime in the state of Tennessee. Really? Yes, it would be a crime, and I'm going to tell you why it's a crime, because I looked up the statutory rape laws in the state of Tennessee. Let's review that. Age of consent in Tennessee. Remember, Donwells' son was 18 years old. He tried to solicit intercourse with a minor, 14 years old. 4 years difference. 4 years difference. Let's look. Statutory rape laws in Tennessee. What is the age of consent in Tennessee? I'm going to read it. And you guys can do your own fact checking. Fact check me. A sex crime conviction is one of the most severe you can endure. And that is the truth, because his court records will show that. Because of sex crimes laws, you may not know for sure what is legally considered statutory rape in your state. What is statutory rape? Now, this is Tennessee law. Statutory rape is sexual intercourse with a minor who is 13 or 14 years old or younger by an adult who is at least 4 years older but less than 10 years older than the minor. So, there you go. Punishable, Class E felony, punishable to 1 to 6 years in state prison and a fine of $3,000. So basically, is if the child is under the age of 14 or under, and the adult is 4 years and older. So they're basically saying 18 to 14 is considered statutory rape, punishable by 1 to 6 years in state prison. Look, right here, right here. And you guys can do the old fact checking yourself. So if Donwells' son did that same conduct in the state of Tennessee, he would be arrested for a felony, statutory rape. So it is a crime. So Donwells lied. Donwells' son ended up pleading guilty to that sentence. Here is the sentencing document here. He received 36 months imposed. Some of it says suspended in the Department of Corrections in Arkansas. So he served 3 years. Donwells did say that. That is the truth there. That his son served 3 years for sexual indecency with a child in the state of Arkansas. In the state of Arkansas. Statutory rape laws in Tennessee, that's a crime in most states. In most states. I can't think of any other state that they would allow an 18-year-old to have sexual conduct, solicited sex with a minor that's 14 years old or younger. So this is the pattern of this guy. Now, people might say, oh, he made a mistake. He made, people change and things like that. And, but the problem is Donwells' son also has other conduct in Arkansas that really no one is talking about. And I do think it's relevant considering Summer Wells is missing. Look, check this out. Mugshots. Multiple mugshots. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. We seen this. We seen this, right? Multiple mugshots. Multiple mugshots. Donald Wesley Wells. Well, I'm going to read some of his other criminal cases to you guys so we can kind of get an idea about who this Don Wells Jr. is. Who is this Don Wells Jr.? Who is he? Who is he? So, I'm going to read this here. He has another case in Washington County, Arkansas, right here. Here it is, 1986. State of Arkansas versus Donald Wesley Wells. There's another individual there, co-defendant. Blacked it out. But the co-defendant's name was Randy Neal Gardner. Randy Neal Gardner, this guy right here. This is his co-defendant. They both committed some crimes. They both committed some crimes together. They both committed some crimes together. I'm going to read what these crimes were. I'm going to read the felony information in these court documents. Matter of fact, spin it around. I, Terry D. Jones, prosecuting attorney within the 4th Judicial District of the state of Arkansas, of which Washington County is a part of, in the name and by the authority of the state of Arkansas, accuse the defendants Blank and Donald Wesley Wells of the crime of criminal mischief in the first degree, count 1, count 2, criminal mischief in the first degree, count 3, aggravated assault, criminal mischief in the first degree, count 4. Let me spin this around, get more information about this case. Here we go. Here we go. This is what Don Wells Jr. did with his co-defendant, Randy. That's his name, right? Randy? Randy. Let me just make sure. Randy Neil Gardner, his co-defendant. Looks like they're around the same age, so I'm assuming they were pals, friends. Felony committed as follows. They said the defendants on or between October 22nd, 2004 and November 21st, 2004 in Washington County unlawfully and purposely and without legal justification destroyed or caused damage to any property of another in excess of $500 on or between October 22nd, 2004 and November 12th, 2004. The defendants spray painted pictures, obscene gestures, and numbers on concrete walls and sidewalks at Walker Park, causing a damage estimate to be $2,200 against the peace and dignity of the state of Arkansas. Count number 2, purpose and without legal justification destroyed or caused damage to any property of another in excess of $500 in violation of Penal Code blah 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 on or about October 27, 2004. The defendants painted pictures of marijuana leaves and other objects on the walls and elevators of the town center, causing damage in excess of $600 against the peace and dignity of the state of Arkansas. Now, count 3 here is pretty wild here, and this is crazy that somebody would do this. Count 3, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, they purposely engaged in conduct that created a substantial danger of death or seriously physical injury to one another on or about November 21st, 2004. The defendants dropped a 20-pound battery from the Center Street Railroad overpass into a car driven by Stacy Manuel against the peace and dignity of the state of Arkansas. Did you hear that, people? Him and his friend were on a bridge and dropped a battery, a 20-pound battery, onto a car. I mean, thank God Stacy Manuel, the victim, did not get seriously hurt on that. That's crazy. But he did it again. He did it again. Count 4. Purposely without legal justification destroyed or caused damage to any property of another in excess of $500. On November 21st, 2004, the defendants caused damage to a motor vehicle by dropping a battery through the rear windshield, causing damage in excess of $500. So they were dropping batteries off a bridge onto cars. This is Don Wells' son. This has not been talked about by anybody out there. Why? Why? I do think it's irrelevant. I do think it's irrelevant. So he ultimately pled guilty to these charges, him and his co-defendant. There's judgments. I believe he got 72 months supervision probation for this act, fines, DNA collection, benefit of Tim and Stacy Manuel. That was the victim mentioned. I think they got $2,600. They got some sort of restitution. The $2,600, City of Fayetteville Parks received restitution. So basically is, you know, he got held accountable for that, which is good. Which is good. So it goes beyond just and here it is. Here's his actual judgment here. He got probation for it. He got probation for it. Criminal mischief, first degree, 72 months probation. So we got 6 years probation for that. He got 6 years probation for that sentence. He got 6. But here's something interesting I found. I have here another court document here. This is called the prosecutor's short report of circumstances. right here on him for what he did. And they have a list of aggravating factors, and there's a couple check marks that are listed there. Defendant was on probation or parole at the time, and he has a serious prior record. Serious prior record. That's what was listed in the aggravating factors that the prosecutor mentioned. He was already on probation at the time when he did these acts. Defendant broke into 3 cars and stole property. By doing so, he violated his previously probated sentence. That's another charge, by the way, as well as his suspended sentence. So that's crazy. Now I have a list here of all his charges and all his cases. All his charges. This is Don Wells' son. This is Don Wells' son. And he has a criminal mischief case, 5/3/2003, it looks like, or November 2004, criminal mischief case. He has that aggravated assault case. That looks like he got that 72 months prison sentence. He also has theft of property case from 2006. And then he has that child indecency case from 2005. So we're talking multiple cases, theft of property, throwing batteries off vehicles onto cars. He now has to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life, I believe, in the state of Utah. He's in Utah. He's in Utah. And here is a picture of him with one of Don Wells' sons. There he is. Now, I thought this was very, very important to share, considering Summer Wells is still missing. Is he involved in any way? Because remember, Don Wells insists that some bad person kidnapped Summer. If you want to believe that, which I don't, but say you do, you would think the probability of a kidnapper would already know Summer was up there. Where was Don Wesley Wells, his junior, his son, at the time? Now, Don claims in that interview, oh, my son is not involved. He was in Utah, whatever like that. Did he conspire with anybody? Did he share information about familiarity with that house? Because, again, a random stranger would not know to park on Ben Hill Road and go up the dog trail and just snatch somebody and bring them down. A random person would not even know a house is up there and wouldn't even dare do that. So if you want to go with the kidnapping theory like Don Wells is claiming, remember, they released a statement yesterday. Oh, kidnappers, release, or kidnapper, or person or persons, bring back our child. You have destroyed our lives. We can't get jobs anymore. Me and Candace, can't get jobs. Oh, pity us, right? Okay. So that's why I'm presenting this. Is the son involved? Or did the son conspire with anyone to say, hey, look, I have this is her, because his son conspired with others people before to do criminal acts. Nobody took Summer. I agree. But again, no stone unturned, and I'm going off what their statement was yesterday about the kidnapping. Who is the kidnappers? Are the kidnappers close to Don and Candace Wells? I don't think so. But I do think it was important to share that information about Don Wells' son. It's more deep into his behavior too. He's in Utah. But did he ever go to Tennessee? Or did he ever instruct anybody? I mean, has authorities questioned him? Is he under investigation? I was told he is. I don't know. People are saying no, but I was told he is by my sources for something. I mean, in all fairness, too, okay, so I will be objective here. A lot of those criminal cases are from the mid-2000s, like 2005, 2006, and stuff like that. He's older now. He's in his 30s. Looks like he was younger back then. But is he still doing these acts? Has he been looked at? Has the Wells family members been thoroughly looked at? Summer is still missing. You would think. if there was a family member that went missing, that law enforcement would cover, cross their T's and dot their I's, and interview and analyze every single family member dealing with that family to make sure each and every one of them had an alibi. You would think. But we're speculating because law enforcement does not reveal to us anything about this case. Yes, Don had another child, a daughter, with Pamela Wells. I actually put a Facebook video about Pamela. She has 9 Facebook profiles, by the way. Don Wells' first wife, Pamela, who is like almost 14 years older than him, she has 9 profiles, 9 Facebook. I thought that was very, very strange or odd with that. So Don had a daughter and a son with her. Now, Pamela had children with multiple people. I think she said she had 23 children, 55 grandchildren, and a rack of great-grandchildren. I don't know who she had these children with, but I think her and Don had 2 children together. And I also think they were the ones involved with the domestic violence incident that happened in Tampa, Florida, way back in the 90s. Don Wells, when you look on some of his arrest records, he says he claims he was born in Tampa, Florida. So Don Wells and his wife were involved with a domestic violence incident way back in the 90s. Don went to jail for like a week. I think the case got dismissed. These are old cases, so they're very hard to get the details about these cases. But Pamela and Don had the child, or had Don Wesley Wells Jr. and the other child. I'm not going to say her name. She seems like, but people interviewed her. Has authorities interviewed her? But go back and review this, video and share. Don Wells' son, he's not as squeaky clean as people portray him to be. I mean, he's done some serious stuff. Is he involved with other serious stuff? We haven't heard from him either. We haven't heard from Don Wells' son. Never gave a statement that I know of. I don't know if you guys heard him say anything. I haven't heard him say anything about this. I have seen Pamela, his ex-wife, defend Don in reference to the kidnapping theory. I don't know how she would know or why she would do that, considering she is all the way out in Utah and doesn't really know, because she wasn't in Tennessee at the time, or maybe she was, that we don't know about. Maybe she was. But where was Don Wells' son around the time Summer was reported missing? What do you think? Let me read some of the comments here. Go back and review this video. Pamela spoke to the media. Search Pamela Wells, Jonathan. Pam says that she supports Don and Candace, and Summer used to call her grandma. I think it was Fox. Yes, I heard the grandma, and I don't understand that. Why would Summer call Pamela grandma? Now, Pamela is like 14 years older than Don. How did they even hook up? But why would she call her grandmother? I thought that was odd. Tiffany Marie that put that comment out there. Yes, I heard that too. That Pamela, Summer would call Pamela, Don's first wife, grandma. She is older, but why would you do that? You wouldn't it be like, I don't know if it would be stepmom. I don't know. How would that work? Yes, someone put Pamela's age. Yes, she is in her 70s. We all know Don's age. He's in his late 50s, whatever. Don's ready to get out of jail. I don't know. See, now I'm wondering about Don Wells, right? My thoughts on Don Wells, because he's been talking to us. He spoke to us many times, right? Don talked to us many times in conversations in December and January before he went to jail. And he was talking about he wanted to go back to Utah. But considering what we're hearing about Utah possibly bringing charges on Don, whether that's true or not, why would Don even contemplate wanting to go out to Utah? you would think he would try to stay away. Where is Don going to go? Like, literally, where is he going to go? He has that piece of property. But Crime Stories Obsessed. You try to speak to Pamela, but she won't talk. So she won't talk. Now, I have a source who has... I'm going to reveal these screenshots that I got. I don't know the authenticity to them, so I haven't really shared that yet. But I know someone that talked to Pamela and had conversations, and she sent me like 50 screenshots of racks of conversations. Pamela says some interesting stuff. I'll just share it. I guess I'll do another live in a day, and I'll share. It's very weird how these screenshots are set up, but she claims she's talked to Pamela about Summer, and Pamela said some interesting stuff in that conversation. Maybe it's worth sharing, and maybe you guys can provide some insight off that. I'm only sharing this stuff because I want you guys also. I'm interacting with y'all and hearing your input and reading your comments and hearing a lot of things that you have to say about this situation. Because there's stuff, I don't know everything, and there's some stuff that you guys might know that I don't know. Has Don Wells Jr.'s son, has he been arrested anywhere else besides Arkansas? Has he, had any contacts with police? Does anyone know if sheriffs or TBI actually spoken to Don Wells' son? Does anyone have that? And if you do, please, I'm asking you to source it, put it in the comments after this video, the source of that. I'd like to read and look into this matter more, because right now we don't know. We don't know. So, I would think that any family member of Don Wells is a suspect too. They are publicly cleared. That's the position I'm taking. I don't know if you guys feel otherwise. Was sharing Don Wells' criminal history, his son's criminal history and his past, relevant to this case? Just considering that he's in the spotlight. He's part of this. I think everyone should be analyzed when it comes to that. No, he's registered in Hawkins County, Tennessee. Yeah. So, I appreciate you guys coming on. I'm doing more lives in reference to this. I'm still looking in. I just got the records about the septic tank and the installment of that when the property used to be owned by Don Wells' property used to be owned by Karen Goad, his mom. I believe based off the septic tank records that were done in the early 90s, it seems like that property, there was a very big gap on tax references, for tax purposes on the Wells property between 1977 and up to 1993. It seems like 1993 is when they did some septic tank and soil work on their property and stuff like that. I don't know if that was because they wanted to or that it was mandatory through Hawkins County. Not sure, but the Wells' mother, Goad, paid. She paid to have stuff done to her property and stuff like that, because it got under my antenna, because we keep hearing the cesspool or the septic tank issues on the Wells property. Other people were telling me, the Wells couldn't even flush their toilets properly, and they had to dispose their waste at a different method than what we're used to by using a toilet and just flushing. So someone, Kelly Gibson, Jonathan Don Jr. was interviewed by the FBI. That's what Kelly Gibson says. So, what did he reveal? What does he know? Did he provide more insight about his father? Did he remain silent? If he was interviewed by the FBI, do you think that he actually talked? Or do you think he kind of, no one has to talk to anyone that comes to your house. So if Don Wells' son was at his house and knock, 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 this is the FBI. Do you think, first off, do you think Don Wells, okay, let me ask you something. After Summer Wells went missing, do you think Don Wells started making phone calls to the people close to him and said, do not talk? If law enforcement comes to the house, whatever like that, do not talk to them under any circumstances. I think he probably did. I think he probably told, I do think between him and Candace's mother, they have a pact between each other, and they sticking to that story, and they're not going to be unwavered. They're not going to go off that story. But do you think Don Wells contacted other people like his son or his mother or his one sister out there that's supporting him? I believe her name is Sonia. Do you think he contacted these people and said, if police come to your house about this situation, do not talk to them or lie to them or try to lead these people? I'm wondering. So Don's son is out in Utah, gets a knock on the door, bam, 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 bam. He goes over, answers the door. This is Agent so-and-so with the FBI, and usually the FBI always goes in pairs. Hi, we want to talk to you about the Summer Wells case. Do you think he was like, sure, this is what I know? Or do you think he was kind of hesitant on speaking, or maybe even told him, I know nothing, contact my lawyer, see you later? We don't know. We don't know. Just like Don Wells' first wife. Do you think authorities, FBI, went to her? And do you think they were forthcoming with the information? Just don't know. Can't say yes, can't say no. I wish we knew. And if any of you guys know, I'm asking, this is part of trying to stimulate the conversation, try to get the you guys going, because you guys, there's 500 people on this thread right now, and all of you know something, right? And all of you know something. Maybe you guys can share something that we all don't know, and we all can collectively find out new information based off this video of Don Wells' son. Do you guys think Don Wells' son is involved? Do you think? Because personally, I might think he's not, but I don't know. I don't know. And that's why I felt like just basically bringing up his past is kind of like wild. Because if you're luring he's 18, 14-year-old girl. If he's luring a 14-year-old girl to have intercourse, then, that's a tendency of he's teenager, just adulthood, but you're still into younger people. You're still into younger people, and that's not, it's sick, man, It's sick. It's sick. And, obviously the courts agreed with that, called him a dangerous person. I showed you the documents. The courts consider Don Wells' son a dangerous person. Was he involved? Did he do anything in any way? So thanks for joining. Keep tabs, following this case, posting more videos, digging in hard. Not going to stop. I say this on the record. I'm not trying to brag or concede, but I am the king of the open records requests. I file open records requests and dig documents all over. That's what I do. That's what I do. I'm an inquisitive type of guy, right? I'm inquisitive. So whenever we hear about people that are involved, I try to dig in and see records, and whether it's tax records or permit records, criminal records, court cases. Just dig, because sometimes hidden clues are out there. Hidden clues are out there about the situation. I didn't really look deeply as far as I just did into Don Wells till yesterday. I just looked into Don Wells' son yesterday. I should have done this 6 months ago, just so I can paint a picture. Will it be biased with my thinking of what happened this summer? I don't know. But they're adamant. The Don Wells people are adamant. You've read the fake letter, the fake Don Wells letter that was released. Kidnapper. Okay. All right. You think a kidnapping happened? Who kidnapped her? So this is kind of all going off what they did, what they put out. Okay. Well, to me, statistics show the kidnapper is closest to the family, or someone that knows the family, not a random. Okay, fine. You say kidnapper. Was it your son? Tim Mullen, media manager, you say it was a kidnapper. Was it Don Wells' son? Why don't you release a statement, Tim Mullen? Release a statement. Was it Don Wells Jr.'s son? Was all of Don Wells' family members properly interviewed and vetted? You're saying a kidnapper. Statistics show kidnappings done by people closest to the family. Tim Mullen, releasing statements, purporting to be Don Wells. We all know that letter was not written by Don Wells. It might have been given to you, and then you reread it or give it to somebody else to rewrite it. I don't even know if that's a word. Maybe Don Wells did send you a letter, Tim Mullen, from jail. But that's not his handwriting, and that's not his letter. You might have rewrote the words or had somebody rewrote those words and then added additional words. What did that say? Sincerely, Summer's father. Give me a break. And then at the bottom here, copywritten. Copywritten, may not be altered. Owner, Donald Wesley Wells. Come on, give me a break. Give me a break. You might have fooled the media, but you ain't fooling us that have been following this case. You're not going to fool us, because I haven't really seen any YouTubers that said, oh yeah, that's real. That's real. You know, YouTubers that have, you know, big followings and have platforms and have been on this case say, oh yeah, that's legit. Don Wells wrote that. No. I think all of us said that's bogus, or question the authenticity of it. It's bogus. It's not even his behavior. He don't even talk like that. Don Wells doesn't even talk like that. Oh, forgiving, you know, do what's right and everything like that. No, I've heard Don Wells in conversation screaming, saying derogatory, like, you know, things like he has no sympathy in his mind for whoever did what, you know, he's claiming did this summer. So he didn't write that letter. He didn't write that letter. That's another concoct story. Now I said yesterday by Tim Mullen, and I said yesterday, Tim Mullen yesterday won the PR battle. He won the PR battle. I'll say that because many media outlets, without fact checking, put it out as a fact. Oh yeah, Don Wells wrote a letter to the kidnappers. You know, some kind of twisted, oh, it came from Don Wells' website, a letter, you know, to kind of play both sides of the fence, so it's like ambiguous with whether Don Wells wrote it or not. But many media outlets said, oh yeah, for statement of fact, Don Wells penned a letter pleading for his kidnappers to return summer. And you have destroyed our lives. And we can't get jobs again. We can't get jobs again. Me and Candace, because of what happened. You know? And I shared this yesterday. Let me see if I can still find it. Screenshot from yesterday. I might not have it. I might have it. But someone gave me a speculation about that, right? And said that, you know, the court date is coming up. The court date is coming up with them to determine whether they should get their parental rights or, you know, back or not. You know, is they just using this as an excuse because they didn't get their jobs. They didn't get the jobs that was required, one of the requirements. Because we know once CPS takes your children away, or whatever agency you want to call it, DCF, DCS, Child Protective Services, they're not going to, you know, you would think. Now, I don't know. I mean, we've heard instances where the children go back into the hands of monstrous parents. But you would think with them not having a job, they wouldn't get the kids back solely on that. Solely on that. So are they using this letter, the purported letter of Don, as an excuse, saying, well, you know, due to the outcry and stuff like that, it's preventing us from getting the jobs. We want to get the jobs, but we can't. But we can't. I think Don Wells actually said one time, oh, Candace tried to get jobs, but no one will hire her. What? Candace tried to get jobs, but nobody. Where did Candace try to get a job? I haven't heard Candace trying to get a job. Nobody even knows where Candace is. I don't think she's at that house. I don't think she's at that house. She's somewhere. But, I mean, I'd be dumbfounded if those boys go back into their hands. But it seems like they have a court hearing coming up, possibly. And that's a civil matter, but they also have, you know, the criminal case, because this agency is going to determine whether charges are brought on them for behavior. Why isn't there charges yet? Will there be charges? Now, let me ask you something. You know, at one point, say the agency charges them with stuff that has nothing to do with Summer's disappearance, but just, you know, child abuse, child neglect, and everything like that. You would think they would have to charge them soon, because from the time the conduct on, the statute of limitations start going. Now, if these are misdemeanor cases, but actually I heard that possibly one of the child abuse charges could be a felony or whatever. Like, they have to have a certain amount of period of time till then they have to charge, or if not, the limitations run out from the time, you know, that they know the conduct. So it's been over a year. It's been over a year. I mean, what's the statute of limitations on misdemeanors? At that point, you would think they would have to charge them soon with something when it comes to the misdemeanor stuff, unless they really are trying to build felony cases against these people, or no case at all. No case at all. I mean, we're all saying, oh, yeah, they're going to be charged. They're going to be charged. I can't wait till they're going to charge. What about if they don't get charged? What about if they don't get charged? What about if we just speculate, you know, what about we're just speculating about evidence that, you know, they did this and, you know, based off hearsay, and then, you know, they don't have the evidence to charge them? How would you feel about that? I would be angry. I would be angry. I'll tell you why I would be angry, because I've talked to many people around them, and they said that all these bad things that were going on at the property. I mean, I was looking at a Instagram account of Candace yesterday, and I saw like young teenagers on her property and pictures on there. You know, it looked like they had alcohol in their hands. You know, on the property. They didn't have shirts. It was on her Instagram. I was like, wow, who are these boys? Candace has a tendency to hang around with minors. I don't know if that's to groom them. I don't know why she feels comfortable hanging around with these minors, you know. It's strange, because, you know, like at me, like, you know, I try to live a responsible life, and I don't even feel comfortable hanging around or being one. I wouldn't even feel comfortable being around with somebody under the age of 18. You know, oh yeah, this is my bro, this is my friend. You know, I'm an adult. I'm in my 40s. Candace is in her 30s. Why would you be hanging around with minors and juveniles? Like, it's stupid. It doesn't make no sense. They have nothing. You have nothing in common with a minor. Why would you even want to be alone with them and putting yourself in a bad position? Why would you even do that? You know, we saw the video of Candace and Hunter in bed together. They look more than friendship, right? Oh yeah, we're just hanging out. You know, peace sign. You know that. You saw it. You guys know what I'm talking about. You guys know what I'm talking about. Why would you do that? Why would an adult in their 30s be doing that and hanging around with minors that are like 15, 14 years old? It's sick. It's sick, but what did we say? The apple doesn't fall from the tree, or the apple falls from the tree. These analogies, because, you know, Don Wells' son. That's what he does. You know, Don Wells. It seems like he showered. He admitted that he showered and slept with Summer. I mean, that's sick. That's sick. Candace is 40, going on 13. Exactly. That's the mentality she had. Hey, why is Dr. Phil throwing out these videos like in the last couple of days? If you go to Facebook, you see Dr. Phil like every 4 hours he's putting out clips about this previous video. What is Dr. Phil trying to do? Is he just trying to keep the case going? And what do you think his theory is on that? I like to interesting to know, because I saw Dr. Phil's posting videos about their about that show they went on with the behavioral panelist guys and stuff like that. But I'm my mind is dumbfounded. Like, yo, why does Dr. Phil have the conclusion that they're not involved or they didn't do anything to hurt Summer? It's just baffling. Consider everything that we've seen and heard. Makes me wonder, is he just gaslighting the Wells, or trying to say, hey, I don't think you're involved, but tell me more, you know, like just trying to troll them to get more information out of them? Or does Dr. Phil generally at the time, now it's different, now it's a year later or 8 months, 9 months later, does he still feel that Candace and Don are not involved with this case? You know, as far as doing something to hurt Summer? I think he was just saying that. Yeah, I think so too. You would think, you know, because you can't just, I mean, I guess he would just say that to get him on the show. Because that show, it didn't seem like Candace was comfortable in that chair. And the behavioral guys were sitting in front row, and they were interacting with Candace and stuff like that. I wish they pressed her more, you know, about, you know, those tough questions. These people need to be asked tougher questions. You know, when Don Wells, if he does get out in jail, these media got to stop throwing softballs at them with, oh, what do you think happened? Stuff like that. Call them out on their BS. Call them out on their BS. For instance, Don Wells. Oh, yeah, Candace called me. I told her to hang up. I called 911 for my job, put the tools in the vehicle, raced home, you know. And then in another incident, he says, oh, yeah, Candace called, told her to hang up. I put the tools in the car. I started driving, called 911. Well, right there, there's discrepancies right there. Why were you saying 5:30? I know Don tried to answer that. Well, why did they go right to the shed? You know, another YouTuber played a video where Don was like, we drove to the shed. You know, who was we? People got to start asking Don these questions. Stop throwing softballs and trying to avoid the uncomfortable truths. The uncomfortable truths. Ask Don Wells, just like what I played. Why did you claim to the media that it was no big deal with your son, criminal past? Oh, it was just a minor, when in fact, or it was just somebody, a year, 18 months. Why why did you lie? She was 14 years old. Why did you say it was only a year? Things like that. Things like that. Or, why did you say that you had a problem with Jose at the house and you raced home, but you came home and was chilling for like a week before you had that incident with Jose? You're acting like, oh, I just raced home and confronted Jose with, Candace and everything like that. People got to ask these questions. Why do you think it was a kidnapper? Why do you believe Candace's story? Why are you sticking with what Candace says is the way it happened? Why do you always put the religion card in these videos, and every time you talk on YouTube, you always throw God, and we want to surround ourselves with church people? Why do you use that as a deflection? They were saying he blinked a lot too. And his the two behavioral guys, that analyzed him, said he kept blinking, and that's a sign of nervousness. And then Candace, the cornbread mafia stuff is just unbelievable. She starts breaking down and crying. It's just weird. It's just weird. And I don't buy the cornbread mafia at all. I think that's just garbage. I talked to many people in that area. They never even heard of the cornbread mafia. They laugh at that notion. Oh yeah, the cornbread mafia did something. It's just constant lies, whatever like that. But you would think that law enforcement, if they have to build a circumstantial case down the line in reference to this, is using statements that they said on YouTube and, inconsistencies, and will possibly used against them. I mean, I think they have enough if they just go by everybody, YouTube creators, and all the interviews that they gave and try to say, well, why did you say this? And then you said this and it's totally different, and build a circumstantial case if need be down the line when we're at that stage. But it doesn't seem like we're at that stage, or maybe we're at this stage and we just don't know. Maybe we're at the stage and we just don't know. Maybe, they're doing stuff behind the scenes right now that are, compiling digital evidence and forensics, and they're, going to present it to a grand jury, and, something's happened. We don't know. We can't say they're not doing nothing because we just don't know. We just don't know. So, God bless everyone. I'm out. Review this video. Shared a lot. Don Wells Jr.'s passed. All right. Stay safe. Thanks for joining. Subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification button. I say that a lot. Just want you guys, involved and stuff like that. I dig. I'm gonna go eat some lunch and feed my ducks. Got ducks outside my home. Pet my cat. See what you guys read your comments later on. Review other Summer Wells videos that other content creators are putting out there. And we will go from there. We won't stop. We are Summer's Army. I see a lot of prayers. Yes, a lot of prayers. A lot of prayers out there. A lot of you care. I respect all of you. I respect all the YouTube creators out there that are actively trying to find Summer Wells. You care. I can tell you care. I mean, I care. I care. I want this case solved. I want the people held accountable. And I say that as a quasi journalist, activist, concerned citizen. I say that in many capacities. Right? All right. See you later. God bless. Everyone be safe. Love your loved ones.